America nowadays lacks the sort of spirit which it used to have, and replacing it is a bunch of things.
So identity can be triggered. So there were millions of American Jews who didn't really care about the Jewish state of Israel until the
That's correct.
1967
Yeah,
war.
I knew
And
that was coming.
yeah. And so after 9/11, uh, my block had a block party where we all gathered together and broke bread for the first time. So you can experience a 9/11 and suddenly have an American experience just completely rekindled, or you can leave the country for a while, and then suddenly you realize what you miss about America. So our identities are often going to take us by surprise. And so America certainly has its share of problems. But I think primarily we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And so when we, when things are discouraging to us, say we read a lot of news and we see, negative directions for our orientation about how America should work, then one tends to become depressed about America. But life circumstances can change, and suddenly, wow, this American identity that you thought you didn't really care about can just rear up and seize you.
That can happen. I think that perhaps the identity that's most important nowadays, is there's more of like a decline of patriotism and shared national purpose and all that, would be your regional identity. Say someone from Pennsylvania moving to Australia might find that he or she misses pierogies or some such thing, or Snyder's or Utz potato chips, stuff like that. And if he or she returned home, he or she would probably, maybe, I can't, it's not probably, be maybe, would, if feeling homesick, would say, wow, I really miss this. This is where I'm from. And then it would be a resurgence of the identity. Now, if that person went to a part of America that he or she had never visited, going there from Australia, that person would probably feel very socially alienated, because I lived spent my middle school years in Pennsylvania, in eastern Pennsylvania, and there's no doubt that that's very different from Florida, and even more different from someplace like, say, Portland, Oregon. So I think that this thing with America today is that it's so many different things all at once, and that creates confusion. It also creates conflict. And what I really find interesting is how ascendant the left has been over the last 10 years. I mean, it really has just like had this explosion of public support, particularly among the young, to an extent that was not previously seen. Any thoughts on that, Luke?
Yeah, that's kind of concerning and bewildering as someone who does not share the woke outlook on life. And it's also kind of bewildering how the Republican Party has kind of deliberately become the party of the uneducated, and the Democratic Party has increasingly become the party of people who go to university. And so the Republicans have become the populists, and the Democratic Party has become the coalition of the upper class and lower classes, kind of against the middle class. So
Exactly.
what I do reject from many of my right-wing friends is that they just think it's all over. Like they think it's just, there's no hope. The left is going to win on the basis of the trends that you talk about, or racial demographic trends, or any other trends. They're just absolutely hopeless. And that's what I reject, because everything that we're talking about is contingent. If we got into a nuclear war with Russia overnight, and Russia, let's say, takes out 5 of our cities and kills 10 million Americans, I think you would experience a resurgent American identity. And so the world is constantly surprising us, and I don't think that we're just fated to be doomed, right? There are many negative trends.
I think it depends on what considers being doomed. I think that if there were some sort of catastrophic event, like a nuclear war, which I don't think is any serious chance of happening, or if there were like another 9/11, which I hope doesn't happen, but it would certainly be likelier than nuclear war, I think America would not pull together in the way that it did in 2001. I think it probably would exacerbate already existing conflicts within the U.S., and it would render people even more angry, if that's imaginable. Though it certainly should be, because things can absolutely get worse, as I think Luke and I would both heartily agree. But I think that when it comes to the right, the problem is demographic, but it's not as simple as race. It used to be people just say, well, because of race, we're going to lose. And in some cases, racial demographics are almost 100% correlated with electoral demographics, but that's not always the case. What has happened is something very interesting. I was just reading an article about this today in The Hill. And men, even though the ancestral demographics among men have changed rapidly and they continue to change, men today are not any more on the left than they have been in recent history. Women, on the other hand, are much more on the left. They've had this, surge of leftism within their ranks. So the change here is not that's pushing leftism on the basis of sex is not so much racial as it is well, basically any number of reasons that women are zooming leftward. So these are demographic issues, and these demographics will doom the right. No question about that in my mind. But it's not something like saying, oh, this race is going to have such and such a number, so the right's going to be non-viable in elections. This demographic situation I'm talking about right now, this specific case, is one of a sex, about half of the human species in the US, marching rapidly toward the left with no end in sight, and only seemingly likely increases on the horizon. I believe only that 50, I mean, there are many different reasons, but probably the most striking one is that only 50 some odd percent of young women today identify as being attracted exclusively to men. So they're certainly adopting this sexual identity thing, which is leading them to the left. But it's not just that; it's also getting quote unquote educated at university. It's them believing that somehow men are holding them back from being all they can be, even though many top institutions in today's society are run by women. So it's really complicated. But in terms of demographics that I'm talking about here, that absolutely is dooming for the right. That's doomsday, because there's no way that the GOP can function in a society that continues in this direction.
Well, everything you're talking about are adaptations reacting to incentives. And when the incentives change, the different adaptations will come to the fore. So the German Green Party was very much against nuclear power. It changed its mind recently. Wow, why did they change its mind? Because for the German Greens, it was more important to support Ukraine than to oppose nuclear power. So Germany is firing up coal-fired plants. Europe is firing up coal-fired plants. Europe is looking at restarting nuclear power. Europe is completely remaking its energy policies on the basis of contingencies, on the basis of real world events. Women, like men, respond to incentives. So we've developed in America where to be cool among professional circles, dentists, accountants, doctors, lawyers, is to be on the left. Entertainment industry is dominated by the left. Academia is dominated by the left. Who's a more compelling speaker? Barack Obama or Mitt Romney or John McCain. Like Barack Obama was certainly cooler. So for many of the people you're talking about, it's simply they are incentivized to identify with the left. But now you're getting the rise, extreme transsexual movement, where you're having doctors saying this is a great moneymaker, because once you start doing these transsexual surgeries, people have to come back for repeat visits. Absolutely. And so there are plenty of people who are on the left who are appalled by this development. Other people are appalled by critical race theory indoctrination of kids, and they're pulling their kids out of left-wing schools and sending them somewhere else. So as circumstances change, when life becomes more serious, right? When life becomes more serious, people become more right-wing. So when you have good times, people become degenerate. But if the good times go, then people will adapt to that changing reality by shifting to the right. So if we have some, major economic downturn, if we get into some very nasty war, if life becomes much tougher, people will shift to the right. Then you had the governor in Virginia. He ran a very smart campaign, and he won Virginia. The Republican governor, people didn't think that Republicans could win Virginia anymore. Jair Bolsonaro won the election in Brazil. He was written off